weekend. Um, at least in my circles, a lot of folks are under the weather, so I hope that's not the case for any of you, but I'm seeing lots of head nods. Um, and yeah, that you had some chance to get some respite. I played pickleball for the first time. I can say it's worth the hype. It was fun.
Oh,
So I encourage everybody to get some exercise if you can. Uh, we have a pretty full agenda today, so I'll just give a few broad CYBHI updates, and I think we can jump in. And the first is that, as we gather in this space, the Collaborative Leadership Working Group, to work both at the state and the county level, really to get our systems to row in the same direction, right, and integrate and work together. I wanted to just inform everybody that as part of that effort, CYBHI as an initiative just very recently released a chart book. It's kind of a step toward a shared dashboard, right, of looking at when we think about behavioral health, what actually are we talking about and how can we collectively adhere to a set of common objectives with that. So I'm going to share screen briefly just to walk you through it. And I see Haley on the call, and I'm very appreciative to our partners at Mathematica for really taking the lead and putting this together. So I'll put this link in the chat. And then from here, if you click on the Learn More, you'll open up to a PDF, and it is a chart book that was released again just a week or so ago. Actually, now, wow, time is flying. About a month ago now. And the data in it is not necessarily new. Of course, there's a lag with many different surveys and analyses that happen. So it primarily covers things over the past decade, ending in 2023. But of course, some end earlier, some are slightly later, just depending on the particular source that's there. And within it, um, this is the 15 metrics or 15 objectives to which we are really holding the initiative accountable. And I'm certainly not going to go through all of these right now, but you can get a sense of what is meant by each of these. So, for example, there's three categories, right? Ultimately, what we care about is impacting the health and well-being of our kids throughout the state. And these six objectives within here is what's meant by that. But to get there, we need to improve access and experience with services. So we're also tracking that with objectives 7 through 12, and we need to change the system in different ways. And you can see some of these metrics are included, some are planned for future editions, so more will be coming on that. But if I walk through one of them, right, so decreasing stigma, what do we mean by decreasing stigma? If you click on that, you'll get to a specific section that will say these are the actual survey questions from the actual resources. And you can see some come from more education standpoints, the California Healthy Kids Survey, another one more from the health standpoint, the California Health Interview Survey. And you can see the different ways that we think about stigma, right? So 18 to 25-year-olds, for example, 2 out of every 5 said that they did not receive services because they were concerned of what would happen if someone found out. And in the kids area, same essential finding, right? 44% in 21-22 said they'd be stopped from talking to a counselor or therapist because of stigma. So hopefully this type of data helps inform the conversations you're having. Not all of it is, of course, available at a county level, but some of it might be. And so if you're ever interested, feel free to reach out. We're happy to walk you through it in more detail. So I wanted to make sure everyone was tracking that. I also want to acknowledge on the tumultuousness, we'll say, that's happening with the new federal administration. I won't necessarily belabor that too much because I know all of you are in the thick of it and working through it in different ways, but really appreciative for your efforts. This chart book, as an example, didn't go through it just now, but it continues to highlight that there are disparate outcomes for subpopulations of this state in different ways. And that's part of the CYBHI approach and will continue to be so. And again, just appreciative of all of you working through the different aspects and implications of what's coming there. And then the final thing I'll just end with is just gratitude for all of you. What you'll hear in this meeting is a lot of focus on the ongoing work of developing a toolkit. That work is an all of us work. And so it starts with some of the folks who are the presenters on this call, but really is only going to be beneficial with your feedback and your ongoing really critiques and criticisms and constructive work to make sure that what we develop in this space is of benefit to everybody who's trying to work through the important issues of integration. So I'll close there and then pass to you, Bill. But again, thank you all for everything.
Hey, thanks a lot, Sohail. Appreciate you kicking us off. And good morning, everybody. My name is Bill Porter with Education First. It's great to see you all again this morning. And for those of you who joined sort of midstream, the document, the chart book that Sohail was talking about, I think you put a link in the chat so folks can pull that up. Yeah. I've got my sleeves rolled up. We got a lot of work to do here. I'm going to take a couple of minutes just at the beginning of the meeting to kind of orient us to what we're going to try to accomplish today in some more detail. We've got a lot of work to do today, both today and then also getting ready for our meeting together in March. I want to begin, though, with just a couple of quick introductions of some new faces who you're going to see and hear from a little bit regularly. Let's see if I can get my screen to click here. There we go. So first of all, Haley McCrary is going to be sharing a couple of reflections with us. Haley, I think, has presented to our group before. She's with part of the Mathematica team that's been working with the CYBHI initiative writ large. And the writers of the implementation guide have actually pulled in Haley and her Mathematica colleagues as we think about the various resources that are included in the book, really hoping to tap into some of the wisdom and the expertise and what Mathematica is seeing and developing on the ground as it works with many counties around how is implementation going, how do you self-assess progress. So delighted to have Haley here, and then also wanted to introduce my colleague Brittany Ramsey. Many of you have worked closely with our other colleague Derek Nino over the last year. Derek had to make a move away from Ed First for some personal reasons. He's good, just a lot of family stuff. That was a little bit sudden, but Brittany has stepped in. So I think we'll all miss working with Derek, but look forward to giving you all the opportunity to meet Brittany and start working with Brittany. And so there's some quick bios here on the slide, and you'll see their faces and hear their voices at different times throughout the meeting. Let's see. In terms of what we're going to try to do today, we're going to be looking at the implementation guide. We started that work last month when we looked at chapter 1, which really focused on the idea of a shared and aligned leadership structure for a county. So we talked a lot about the acronyms EAC and ILT. Today, we're going to shift to the second implementation step that the CYBHI ecosystem working paper identified, which is contained in chapter 2 of the guide. And that's really on conducting a needs assessment, engaging community in new and more authentic ways to help both identify needs and to set priorities, and then to develop shared goals and a means of measuring and assessing your progress against those goals. In terms of your role, and again, we used this slide last meeting, just wanted to recap. What we are asking you is the CLWG, all my C acronyms here, as the Collaborative Leadership Working Group, is to work with us to really help us refine this guide. So it's ultimately going to be 4 chapters plus a lot of resources, and the goal is to both help us capture the great thinking around your table, around this table, and also to be able to share that ultimately with the 4 counties that we're working with most directly as part of this project, but ultimately for counties throughout the state as like a lasting legacy of this project. So really the hard work we're doing last month, this month, you're going to see chapter 3 in a couple of weeks, you're going to see chapter 4 in a couple of weeks, really is instrumental to the charge of this group. And really want to thank you again, as Sohail said, for in advance kind of rolling up your sleeves and engaging with us on this important work. Other things happening, we're going to be asking you to provide more customized coaching to leaders in the 4 counties. We're going to be engaging you, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a sec, with your own expertise to sort of help counties as they hit particular challenges that align to areas where you have particular knowledge or content. And as we move through this year and really as we get into next year, we'll begin starting to document and do a lot more dissemination about what we've learned and what the counties are learning. So for today, we're really going to focus on those, I guess, step number 1 there, bullet point number 1, and then bullet point number 3. I'm not going to walk through the agenda expressly. It really is divided into two parts. So we're going to spend the first, I'm going to say 60% of the meeting really talking about the implementation guide. Mike Lombardo and Olivia Kelly are going to do a brief overview of what we heard from you when we engaged you last month on Chapter 1, some of the key themes, some of the key points of advice you offered, and how the writing team is beginning to adopt and integrate your feedback. And then we're going to shift gears and then really talk about Implementation Guide Chapter 2. You got a draft of that, I think, Wednesday afternoon. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it, if you could go to your inbox and maybe dig that up here at some point. We're going to break into small groups like we did in January and encourage you just to go through a couple of key questions at a high level to, again, give the writers some feedback about what's strong, what could be improved, what could be missing, what other resources are you aware of that would be helpful to share with the field? And then for the last maybe 40% of the meeting, we're going to break into a second set of breakout groups working one-on-one with the 4 counties and are going to start talking about individual challenges, opportunities, issues, content needs that the counties are facing right now, both as you think about implementation step number 1, the aligned leadership structure, and then what we're bringing on board today with implementation step number 2, the goal setting and the community engagement, and just start identifying, like I said, opportunities, challenge, content needs, and we will use that brainstorming to inform the design of the March meeting. So back in December, most of you on the CLWG took a survey that really outlined your area's expertise and how you wanted to be engaged. Today, we're really going to work with the counties on what are some of the most pressing needs, challenges, opportunities, and then we're going to try to connect those together and organize our March meeting so that individual CLWG members with particular expertise, insight, or experience can work directly with counties on resolving some of those issues. So really excited for both conversations today, both getting your feedback on Chapter 2 and then sort of this collaborative brainstorming space we'll create with the counties to figure out how best to use the time in March. I was moving relatively quickly through the slides here. Karen has put in the chat a couple of times a link to the registration page. It's not that big of a deal. It's just a way to help us, I think, easily track who's attending the meeting, who's here. Sometimes figuring that out after the meeting is a little bit challenging. So we're trying to proactively say, hey, if you could just fill out this quick survey and just tell us you were here, that would be super helpful. And speaking of registration, also just want to remind folks that this March meeting that I keep talking about is going to be in person. We're going to be down in San Bernardino County at the county school superintendent's office. You've been sent around the registration details a couple times via email, but we'll put the registration link. Again, this one's super easy too. It's your name, your organization, your address, whether you have any food preferences. The registration link will also provide some information about a hotel if you need to spend the night. But talking to some folks, I know there's also early morning flights that will get you in and out of the Ontario Airport, which is the nearest airport to the San Bernardino offices. So if you haven't already, please register so that we know you're coming. As I said, we're going to be spending some time at today's meeting to try to start organizing what the March content, what the March meeting content looks like. And so really knowing who's going to be there, in addition to whether you have any food preferences or allergies, is going to be really important for us to plan a helpful meeting. Gina, I see you've got a quick question here.
Yes, just curious to know for future planning, is there also a summer face-to-face meeting that we can get on our calendars right now and start planning for?
No, Gina, there isn't one this year because of the amount of people being out during the summertime. We went away from that. So our December and our March would be our only two, or November and March would be our only two in person. Thank you for that question, Gina.
Yeah. So November was at the Breaking Barrier Symposium, and then our March meeting. So this is really our, our big 5 or 6 hour meeting. We're really going to work hard at that meeting, and so really hope all of you can make it there. All right. Well, one more thing for me before we get into our meeting content. We've done this a couple times in the past, but I think have gotten a little bit sloppy here at first about just encouraging us to continue to find community with each other. As Sohail hinted at, it's a tumultuous time around the country. Whether you're working for the federal government or not, there has been a lot of repercussions from the discussions, the cutting, the executive ordering in Washington, D.C. And now more than ever, as we're all trying to work together collaboratively to break down barriers and to create a better future in California for kids and families, just wanted to encourage us to break for a couple of minutes here and reconnect with our colleagues. So we're going to put you in groups of 3 or 4 and give you, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 minutes just to discuss this question, which seems both timely writ large to our moment in time right now, but also very relevant to the content we're going to be talking about with Implementation Guide Chapter 2. And that's, what do you think is the most important thing public agencies can do to build trust with communities? So with that, I think we've got things arranged. So you're just going to be magically swept into a random room with some other colleagues, and look forward to the conversations, and also hope all of you have a chance to reconnect with folks.
Okay, we got 4 in each, 10 for each. Yeah, me.
Yeah, Jameen, I'm just gonna broadcast the discussion question again. Do you mind?
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for sharing. I know we had a good conversation in my room, a lot of commonality, but a lot of really kind of provocative questions. So with that, I think we're going to get into the meat of the program. So I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Olivia from Education First, and she and Mike Lombardo are going to kick things off and just do a quick recap of what we heard as we looked across all the feedback from last month's meeting on Chapter 1. So I know you're getting your screen set up here. Yeah. Thanks, Olivia.
Sure. Thanks so much, Bill. Okay. Oh,
Yeah, you got your
it's
one more chance
suddenly-
to register for today's meeting if you haven't. Let us know you're here.
I'm not taking credit for. I have no idea how that happened, but here we go. All right, so let's just do a little bit of a recap of our last meeting and the things that we talked about, the feedback for Chapter 1 of the implementation guide. So just as a bit of a refresher, chapter 1 of the implementation guide, really the goal was to identify some key actions for creating an aligned cross-agency county leadership structure, if you will, that can work to build a new system of care. So if you'll remember from the overview of chapter 1, there were about 8 key action steps that were highlighted. So first was establish a county integrated leadership team, an ILT, and an EAC, an executive advisory committee. And then once you have that, basic structure established, develop a shared vision and goals. And from there, number 3, build trust and accountability on your shared leadership structure. And obviously, chapter 1 gets into these sort of key action steps and details, but this was, again, just the overview. So once you built the trust and the accountability, if at all possible, strive to include youth, caregivers, tribal, and community voices. And then number 5, leverage and maximize financial resources that you have available to you. Number 6, coordinate the ongoing services and new services for care. And number 7, monitor outcomes. How are you doing? And adapt as you go. Learn and adapt. And number 8, of course, celebrate your wins. So that's just a little bit of refresher. And then we also got into breakout groups last time, and each room provided some feedback on chapter 1. And we took your feedback, we summarized it, and I'll let Mike kind of get into what the writing team has been doing with that feedback, but I just wanted to highlight, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to provide your feedback. And that feedback was largely positive, and it also offered several helpful ideas for improving clarity in the chapter and in the guide in and of itself, and to add some additional content. So we're highlighting here just a few high-level takeaways from your comments. Number 1, y'all really wanted the team to incorporate some visuals, graphics, call-out boxes, anything to kind of make the guide perhaps a little bit more interactive and more visually interesting. Number 2, use clear language and definitions. There was a specific call for a clear definition of system of care. And really to make sure the guide does not make any assumptions about, a level of common knowledge for the audience who's reading the guide. Number 3, develop some examples. I think this was almost universal in the breakout rooms. Examples, illustrative storytelling, anecdotes for greater impact and interest and engagement in the content. Number 4, add relevant community schools resources. And thank you so much to everyone who actually sent in their community schools resources. There's a lot that we have to work with and to add in. And finally, number 5, think creatively about design and distribution. Maybe there can be a webinar when the guide is officially published. Maybe there can be an interactive website. So there's some really great ideas. And I will add, if there's anything that's popping into your mind over the next few minutes, pop it in the chat. In terms of more feedback for chapter 1. With that, I'm going to pass it to Mike.
Thanks so much, Olivia, and thank you for doing this work. It was a tall ask for you to take all of the comments, find the duplicates, sort, and do that work for us. And I appreciate you and the rest of the team at EdFirst for doing that and helping to manage us. So the big takeaways again is to make it more visually pleasing, and we are doing that. What we want to do is create kind of a mirror document for write-in purposes. It's just easier to do it in narrative, and then we're going to have supports to help provide those call-out boxes. Sample forms are very popular. A lot of people were asking for examples. Assessment tools, worksheets. How do I get my fingers on How do I, if I'm Peter and Humboldt, what's the takeaway that I can use to help build an ILT? We're going to be engaging with Mathematica to also help us to support the overall CYBHI evaluation, but also to continue to provide the case study examples that we've seen or we saw at Breaking Barriers and across California, and give us some tool examples and sample worksheets. And then lastly, we're going to be engaging with Amanda. I think I saw her on the call in one of the boxes today, Amanda Dickey, part of our CLWG group, also executive director with Santa Clara County Office of Ed, to help support some of the call out boxes and tools. It turns out that CCEE is already working on a project to do a similar task. So we're going to collaborate at the state level, combine our efforts and pull those together. Quick note, I'm going to push registration for our in-person meeting. So when we reconvene in March, that's our opportunity to look at the work that we've done on chapter 1, take another look at it. And so you don't want to miss the in-person. Any quick questions? I see the comments scrolling on the side, and Ed First will track those and add them in. But any quick questions anybody has? Oh, consider a story. I love that video idea, Mary Jane. Okay, well, without much further ado, we're going to roll into our next chapter, chapter 2. And it is my honor to introduce Richard Connect. And many of you know Richard, but he is an essential partner to keeping this process going and the writing of each chapter. So Richard's going to talk to us about our work that we've done since our last meeting on chapter 2 and kind of tee up that feedback loop. So last month, feedback on chapter 1, this month, feedback chapter 2. Hopefully at the in-person, feedback on chapter 3. So you kind of get the cadence here. Turn it over to Richard.
Mike, thanks. Happy Monday, all. Good to be with you again. Really love this conversation. So long needed here in California. So thanks again for joining us. I see lots of familiar faces. I think we've met most of you, at least in Breaking Barriers, if not in a prior meeting here. So you know us. I think you've already been introduced to us a couple of occasions now, so we can probably rifle quickly through this. Once an interagency leadership team, a structure is in place, it's important to remember, some of you will remember back to the ECO paper, the imperative one of the imperatives the ECO paper emphasizes is the interdependence of the structural, functional, and vision pieces, right? We're not creating a structure outside of the functions we share, nor is that structure created outside of a vision that's collective to the participants in the structure. There's this profound interdependency of these functions. And so I want to emphasize as we lead into chapter 2 that the ILT, the Executive Advisory Committee, whatever your backbone formation is, instantly takes on a functionality as well, right? So you understand that there are things that we do in leadership that create the functionality of the backbone. They're not separate from the structure. They're one and the same. They're deeply interdependent. Once those things are in place and there's a vision on the ground, then step 2 becomes the establishment of what our community needs are. What do our young people and their caregivers need? And how do we develop goals to meet those needs, right? So just like chapter 1, we have formatted chapter 2 in draft form into a why, what, and how formation. And we hope that resonated with you enough in chapter 1 that there's support for application of that in chapter 2 as well. And again, with your support beginning today, actually, a couple of you have already been in there over the weekend. I noticed some active involvement. Thank you again for those of you who've jumped right into that. We'll get chapter 2 in a place where it's super informative. Let's go ahead to the next slide then and just talk about what that why, what, and how looks like. So here again is a slide that illustrates for us this interdependence between vision, structure, and functions, right? And to my point around the ILT having both a functional and structural element. The second step of identifying what the needs of the community and the youth are has a vision piece to it. That's why that's circled there, that communities and families are empowered as partners to elevate their interests. That's part of any local collective impact vision, right? And then in the functional area, the interdependency here is that we, with that vision, we begin to define what are our outcomes and how are we going to hold ourselves accountable to that through a continuous ongoing process, right? So you can see again by illustration, this deep, deep interdependency of approaching our work not as a chicken or egg question, but as a chicken and egg question, right? We got to do function, vision, structure all simultaneously. And that's what makes it so complex. We are both architects, engineers, and construction managers at the same time. In the why section of this, what we have sought to populate is that based upon the working paper, the ecosystem working paper's definition here, which you can read in quotation, we've begun to establish what we think some of the shared goals and outcomes might be that will actually lead to greater impact. And the reason for that, the imperative, establishing the why for that, which is part of the vision piece, right? Why we hold ourselves to this really complex work. It's easy to stay in a silo. It's easy to stay fragmented, relatively. Way more difficult to be in partnership to do things like establish what's our return on investment, right? And so these why elements are here for your review as you dig into the paper. And maybe there are others that we've missed or that need greater emphasis as you help us develop this content in chapter 2. But we think that these are the essential drivers to why there's value in an interagency establishment of community needs and a process of working with kids and families to address those needs, if that makes sense. So all of these things are part of the imperative, if you will, for why collective establishment of needs and goals is critical. In the next slide, you'll see our what, and we've begun there to establish what that actually means. And this is where it begins to get really complicated and technical. And so it's imperative that there be some kind of a statement of intent around what that vision is, because remember, when the going gets tough, when the technical stuff begins to overwhelm us, we got to cleave or cling to the vision of what we've agreed to as part of our early work, right? That what the ILT wants to do together. And the establishment of a set of collective objectives that include a determination or identification or an assessment of the outcomes and outputs for each of the system partners is necessary. And this is where, again, there's redundancy in our system. And what's fascinating for many of us when we first come to terms with this is to recognize within each of the departments or agencies that forms a collective approach, we're obligated to assess often in code or by way of funding obligation, funding accountability. We have to assess certain things, certain outputs or outcomes for kids and families. The irony is that our partners are often asked to identify and assess and monitor the very same things. Things like kindergarten readiness. We call it different things in welfare or mental health. We don't call it kindergarten readiness, but it's essentially kindergarten readiness, right? If you look at some of those first 5, if some of you are familiar with the first 5 commission, maybe some of you have been first 5 commissioners, all of that 0 to 5 work, there's data there, and there are outcomes determination processes inherent in every first 5 commission that can be leveraged within a broader system of care, if you will. Same for things like the number of kids that end up in an emergency room, right, for a behavioral health crisis. The mental health authority is obligated to monitor that. And so the 2 quick examples of where there's this often present redundancy, overlap, if you will, in the systems. And by being in a collective, the partnership can determine what those are and thereby yield some of the gains we talked about in the prior slide, right? Like reduced administrative burden, greater coherence of data, right? All those things. So you'll see in chapter 2 a section on the what. And then finally, the how to do that. And we've got a start on some of this content here. We want to do things like identify and connect existing needs processes exactly for the reasons that we were just talking about, right? And how communities have responded heretofore. So you're taking your LCAP data and taking your external quality review data from behavioral health, taking your SIP data from child welfare and probation, crosswalking that, right, to see where those overlap pieces are. Second piece of the how would be to provide youth, caregivers, tribal experts, others in interest stakeholder positions with authentic and meaningful opportunities to articulate their needs. So this is not about the systems outcomes, which is hard, right? Because the federal and state authorities want you to monitor certain things and they put that in code. That may or may not have value for local partners, right? When you get youth and parents in those conversations with you in shared governance, they're going to tell you, I don't really care about that. I want to monitor this, right? So you've got this confluence and potential conflict of where you're going to try to figure out what's the return on investment for us. It's not just about compliance and accountability to the system. It's about what our local communities need. Third thing is to gauge the level of family and youth involvement along a continuum of support, and appreciation to Mike for doing a deep dive on some of this, but he's formulated in here. You'll see in chapter 2 draft, there's a continuum, right, of the depth of shared governance. And think of this is in some ways analogous to the ladder of authenticity, which some of you are familiar with, right? Where we move from tokenism into actuality, or from lesser forms of involvement into deep involvement. And so on the far left-hand side of the spectrum, there's awareness, right? And on the far right-hand side of the spectrum, there's authentic, family-driven, youth-driven care. Getting there is very difficult for all these reasons that you all are familiar with, right? But that's the objective in the system of care work, and the opportunity that's present in aligning around data and outcomes is that if we do that well, it actually gets us to a place of being family driven, right? If we're really tuned in and listening. So that's a quick look at the why, what, and the how. And I think we've got one summary slide here, and then we're going to start to introduce our work for the day. So don't think we need to overstate or restate any of that, but just know that it's about co-creating common goals with the young people and the caregivers we're serving, to consistently monitor the progress towards those goals, to align the services and funding towards them, right? And to synchronize our work as we go forward. We're driven by certain key values along cultural and linguistic responsivity, a focus on capacity development, sustainability, and recognizing as we build voices in community that we have to compensate and recognize the authentic value for that, right? Part of moving beyond tokenism is to understand that if expertise is valuable, then we should reward the expertise the way any other professional is rewarded for being in the system. So some of the things to think about as we build up to a conversation here where we're going to dive into chapter 2 together in groups. Let me pause there and see if there are any quick questions, and then we'll tee up the breakout, I think, Bill, if that makes sense. Okay, great. Any inquiry or curiosity at this point about the summary for chapter 2, the introductory summary? All right, great. Let's go ahead then, next slide. And Bill alluded to this earlier, but we're going to find ourselves in breakout rooms, just as we did last month with the chapter 1. And these questions may look a little bit familiar. We've leveraged from our learning with you in chapter 1, and would invite you to ponder on these questions around, essentially all the questions are around where could this be improved, right? So can the content be improved? Can the formatting be improved? It's just an invitation to give us your critical eye to how to make this chapter better, broken down by the why, what, and how. And then in question 5, element 5 here, you'll see we're inviting feedback from you around your local experience. Where are the bright spots? Where are the examples? We're committed to highlighting these because they're super illustrative, right? So much of this stuff is conceptual unless you're living it. And each of us lives a piece of it. in various ways, shapes, and forms. What we want to do is bring those pieces into a collective so that the value becomes even more powerful when we see, that's the big picture, right? And if we did just a couple more things in our county, we could maybe get over the hump of siloization or fragmentation into whole personness, if you will. So we're going to invite reflections from you about where those bright spots are. So those are what are really 4 questions, really. Well, 5, but that's where we're going to head in the next few minutes. I will yield back, I think, either to, I guess, to you, Bill, at this point?
Yeah, I think to Brittany, actually. Yeah.
Okay, to Brittany, thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much. I've also put the link to the draft chapter 2 in the chat if folks can't, just so it's easy to access, and also copied the discussion questions into the chat for when we go into breakouts. So we're going to go into 4 rooms. They're mixed. We're mixed grouping. On the next set of breakouts, you'll be in your county groups, but for now it's mixed. Each group will have an Ed First facilitator, and we'll be in our groups until about 10:30 to work through these questions. If you need extra time to just kind of review the chapter again, please let your facilitator know. Is there another slide, Olivia? One more, I think, or no? Okay. So, Jameen, I think we can just send folks to the groups now, and we'll come back at 10:30. Ed First.
Welcome back, everyone. That was super productive. I just really appreciate, again, everybody's hard work, the diligence, and sort of reading through the draft carefully, adding comments. It's a little bit messy on this end, and that is just fine in terms of comments. We will take your comments however you can deliver them. So if you offered comments orally, you would kind of note catchers from San Bernardino and Ed First taking those down. If you wanted to reiterate anything in comments in the margins, feel free to just go in yourself and do that. We will take your comments in any way they exist. If you felt like, hey, I didn't really have a chance, or I tried to say what I meant and I didn't quite come out clearly, feel free to send a follow-up note to any of us at Ed First, or to Richard or to Mike. Again, we'll take your feedback however you want to give it. And then maybe just one more thing, kind of personal privilege for the group I facilitated. Just like last time, we didn't quite get to the last question, which was examples. And so I would just encourage folks, if you have some ideas for counties that are doing innovative work in any of these areas, and it doesn't have to be, hey, a county has done all of these things, or a county has succeeded across the grand scheme of things. If it's really, hey, a county did this really interesting thing with family engagement, for example, or a county was able to bring 2 or 3 agencies together and do this interesting thing. Those sorts of examples are terrific too. So they don't have to be comprehensive, although if you know of those counties, that's great. But if there are county actions, especially County Office of Education actions that you're aware of that sort of demonstrate parts of this guide, this chapter in action, that would be terrific. And you can just, again, either reach out to us with those or add some comments in the margins. Okay. Thanks, everyone. All right, we're gonna shift gears here now. As I promised at the beginning of the meeting, we were going to try to use the last 1/3 or 40% of our meeting to meet with the 4 counties and really engage in some whiteboarding or brainstorming sessions to really start talking about, okay, where are each of the counties when we think about some of the steps that we've been talking about last month in chapter 1 with shared leadership. Actually, we began that conversation back in November. Where are we with some of the ideas that came up in chapter 2 today around goal setting and community engagement? And what might be some dilemmas, some opportunities, some new content that would be helpful for the counties as they're trying to make headway here? Where are you all struggling? Where would you like more help? And as I said earlier, we're going to try to really organize our March meeting around those key pain points or those key opportunity points, and really trying to make sure that our CLWG members are organized in a way to weigh in on those points for all of you. So we're going to break here into 4 groups. We have the next slide here. I think I more or less said all of that. these are some of the questions that we've asked the counties to kind of prepare for, and that we hope you'll all be able to engage on. And I'm not going to read all 4 of these questions, but maybe folks can kind of skim these. But broadly thinking about the work to date, where are you feeling stuck? Where are some places you might be feeling stuck, or where are there places where you feel like you've gotten a little bit of traction and could really use some advice on how to go faster and further? Is it helpful to talk about maybe some existing community engagement efforts that County Office of Education in particular, since that's what our teams are comprised of, have engaged in? Are there opportunities to learn more or think more broadly about engaging other partners or other agencies? What are some of the biggest challenges? And then again, what would be kind of content topics? Maybe it's not a challenge, but you're like, hey, I'd really like to learn more about that parent continuum that we showcased. And maybe we could really dive deeply into best practices for engaging parents, or maybe some of you would like some advice on how to engage parents, caregivers, students as decision makers or policymakers at your policymaking tables. So really the floor is open to all of you in these brainstorming sessions to just lay it out there, and we'll try to make some sense of it. What we're going to do now, though, is break you into 4 groups that
Can I jump in real quick, Bill?
Yeah, please go ahead, Mike.
Sorry. I wanted to let folks know too, part of the reason we're doing this is because when we get together, again, shameless commercial for the March in person, we're going to use this data to put people into groups. So we'll have a table talk on family engagement, or a table talk on an integrated leadership team and how do you break down those barriers. So we're trying to get data from you on what would be most useful. And I just made up that word, table talk. Sorry, team. But that's essentially what it's going to be. So it's your opportunity to go around to different expert groups. And the experts are all of you in the CLWG. So that's our hope. Sorry, Bill, go ahead.
No, that was great, Mike. I'm glad you chimed in. That was really nicely said. Really nicely said. So again, that's how we'll be using all this information. We didn't want to make assumptions about, hey, we think all the counties are at this one place and you need to know this one thing. I think we really want to hear from all of you, some of your ideas about what would be most helpful. Why don't we switch slides here then, and we can give you your, just remind you of your assignment. So again, back in July, for those of you who are in person in Anaheim, we organized you very roughly into these 4 groups where we said, this table, go over here, meet with Fresno, you all over here meet with Humboldt, Alameda, Imperial. We've tried to pull you back together in these groups periodically since the Anaheim meeting last July, just as a way of creating some consistency. So people keep showing up at the same county and begin to understand, who are these county people? What do they do? What are some of the challenges they're living with? How's their progress coming along? What's the status of their ILT? What do they call their ILT? But as a reminder, if you kind of forgot the county specifically, or it's been a while, or maybe you weren't at the July meeting, these are the assignments. If you feel very strongly about switching counties, you're going to get I think pushed into one of these rooms. You can pop back out and ask that Jameen reassign you to a different county if for some reason you are feeling the need today to switch counties and visit with one of the other counties. Any questions about the assignment or what we're going to try to get done here?
Bill, I believe it's all self-selected. So what you're going to
even better. Okay.
are the 4 breakout rooms. And so all the county people should go to your respective county. Oops, apparently, yeah.
Great, perfect. All right, so counties, obviously choose your county, folks. You can look at your list here. And again, I guess if you feel very strongly that you'd like to switch counties, you can do that. But generally, these were the, this is what we have on our end for how we had initially assigned you back in July.
And if you don't have an assignment, feel free to pick one.
I'm just going to hang out here for a few more minutes to make sure folks have a chance to join. I know we have a lot of folks who haven't had a chance to join yet. So
I think I'm closing us out today. So just want to thank everyone very much for your input and the discussions today. At least the groups that I was in were very rich. I do want to say, I know that our discussion with the Imperial folks could have gone on. So what I want to really ask you all is if you've got, based on this last discussion about things you'd really want to focus on in March, please send us an email if you've got, you want to send us questions or things that you want to focus on. We'll take what we've heard today as well and start crafting an agenda. But if you've got other thoughts, please send them our way, and sooner rather than later would be great. But we'll plug that in March, and it may be that we have some that we continue to plug in over the course of the future meetings. So please send us any thoughts you have. Again, please remember to register for the March 17th meeting. We have the link in the chat, and maybe Olivia, you could put it back in there one more time. We will take these notes, start developing an agenda, and look forward to seeing many of you, if not all of you, in person in March.
Maybe just one quick thing, Brittany. Back in December, I referenced this at the beginning of the meeting. We did ask you to complete a survey that helps us better map the expertise and the content knowledge and the experience that exists among all of you on the CLWG, as well as different ways you might want to engage directly with the counties. But just building on, so we have that data, but just building on that, if you've sat in any sessions today and people have said, gosh, it'd be really helpful if we could go a little bit deeper on this, and in your head, you're like, well, I just did a presentation on that, or that's what I do all day in my job. Feel free also to reach out proactively to us. And just if you feel like you've got something to add, don't wait for us to call you. Feel free to pick up the phone and call us and say, I'd love to be involved in this way at the March meeting, because I think I've got some expertise to offer based on what I heard some people say in the small group. So please do that for us.
That'd be great. James, any final words from you all?
No, just from the Transforming Together Executive Committee, just thank you all for your participation today. Education First, thank you for the great facilitation. Mike, Mr. Connect, thank you all for your content expertise. So again, looking forward to seeing everyone in March. Any questions, anything, please don't hesitate to contact us for information may needed. All right, other than that, it's 11 o'clock. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.